For the record, both assistant state attorneys are present, both defense counsel and Mr. Sievers. State's ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense is ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Who are you calling?
The state's going to call Curtis Wayne Wright.
Is his lawyer present?
She was. I was just talking to her.
She's next door? Okay.
I think she was trying to...
Once she's ready, yeah, have her come over before we start. I'm sorry? No, I don't. I just want to make sure she got that email. Oh, he missed her. There she is now. Can I have both sides approach? And Ms. Parker, come on down. Yes, ma'am. Miss Parker.
Oh, Parker.
You ready? Okay, for the record, we still have both assistant state attorneys present, both defense counsel and Mr. Sievers. Elizabeth. State's ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, bring them out.
Yes, sir.
You're entering. Please be seated. I'll ask our jurors again, did you follow my instructions, not talk about the case among yourselves or with anybody else or look up any of the people or places involved? Even if you did so inadvertently, now would be the time to raise your hand and let me know. For the record, no jurors lifted their hand. State, next witness.
State calls Curtis Wayne Wright.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you.
Would you step over here, sir? Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can you please state your full name for the record?
Curtis Wayne Wright, Jr.
And- Sorry. Junior,
Yes.
can you please spell your last name for the record?
Wright.
Okay. Mr. Wright, who killed Dr. Teresa Sievers?
Jimmy Rogers and I physically did it, but Marc Sievers was also involved in the planning.
Why did you do it?
I was asked to do it.
By whom?
Mr. Sievers.
Is Mr. Sievers in court today?
Yes, he is.
Can you please point to Mr. Sievers and identify him by an article of clothing?
He's the middle gentleman there at the table. The darker colored jacket.
May the record reflect that the defendant is the middle gentleman in the darker colored jacket.
Let the record reflect he's identified Mr. Sievers.
Okay, Mr. Wright. I see here that you're in custody. Can you explain to us why you're in custody, sir?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
You're under arrest right now. Can you
Yes.
explain to us why you are under arrest?
For the murder of Dr. Sievers.
And you were apprehended by the Lee County Sheriff's Office?
Yes,
Where?
in Missouri.
And have you exercised your right to go to trial, or have you exercised any other option regarding the disposition of your case?
I entered a plea agreement to help to cooperate.
And what is your understanding of the plea agreement to cooperate, sir?
That I'm to testify truthfully in exchange for a 25-year prison sentence.
So if you tell the truth, you go to prison for 25 years?
Yes.
What happens if you don't tell the truth?
The plea's off the table, and I'm not sure how that would work, but I would.
Well, the 25 years is off the table, right?
Right. That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
So if you don't tell the truth, do you believe you might get more than 25 years?
Yes.
Objection calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Okay, Mr. Wright, let me ask you some questions about yourself. Where are you from, sir?
From St. Louis, Missouri.
Where were you born?
St. Louis County. The actual township is called Kirkwood.
How long have you lived in Missouri?
All but 2 years of my life.
And have you lived in the same general area in Missouri, or have you lived in other areas?
Yeah, all within probably a 45-minute range.
Did you go to school?
Yep.
How far did you go, sir?
Some college.
And so you finished grade school and did some college?
Objection leading.
Did you finish
Sustained.
grade school?
Yes. And I graduated high school with a college prep diploma.
What did you major in, or did you declare a major while you were in college?
I initially started out as engineering, but I got more into the computer side of it, so.
Did you undergo any other vocational training after you stopped going to college?
Yes, I've been in and out of training most of my adult life. Being in the computer industry, it changes so often that you have to constantly go back and get like certifications upgraded. And when new languages come out, you have to learn those. A lot of it's self-taught, but you get the paper to back it up.
So you spent some time. Did you ever actually have any jobs working with computers?
Yes.
What kind of jobs did you have?
Mostly programming, some repair, but the core of what I did was always in programming, software development.
Have you done any of that recently?
I've been disabled since 2005. I still I still help people out fixing viruses and fixing their computers and phones and things like that, but it's on my own.
Did you ever have an opportunity to help Marc Sievers out with his computer or computers?
Yes,
Do you have a family, sir?
I do.
And are you married?
Yes.
When did you get married?
May 2nd, 2015.
Was that your first marriage?
No, it wasn't.
You were married before that?
Yes,
How many times?
3. Or 2 others, I'm sorry.
2 others?
Yeah.
So a total of 3.
Total of 3.
Do you have any kids?
I do.
How many do you have?
I have 3.
And do you recall their ages?
Yes. My youngest is turning 16 in a few months. Then I have a 21-year-old, and then I have a 32-year-old.
Okay. And, Mr. Wright, have you been in trouble with the law before?
I have,
Have you ever been convicted of a felony?
yes.
How many times, sir?
I believe it was 4. I'm not really sure of that because I've only been arrested like 3 times, but 2 of those times had additional charges combined, so
Could it have been 5 times?
it could have been, yes.
Okay, so you told us earlier that you were in custody because you had been involved in the death of Dr. Teresa Sievers.
Yes.
Where were you when you became aware that there was an investigation into her death? What state were you
I
in?
was still in Missouri.
Did law enforcement officers come to Missouri?
They did.
And when they came to Missouri, did you actually have contact with Lee County Sheriff's deputies up in Missouri?
Yes.
Did they ask you about if you had any involvement in the Teresa Sievers death
Yes.
or had been to Florida?
Yes.
Did you tell them the truth?
No.
You lied to them.
I did.
At the time you lied to them, did you have an attorney?
No.
Why did you lie?
To protect me, Mark, and Jimmy.
When you said to protect me, Mark, and Jimmy, is that what you said?
Yes.
You didn't want to get arrested.
No. I tried to derail, throw the detectives off our track. Was the reason that I told them what I did.
But you got arrested anyway, right?
Yes.
And then at some point, did you get transported to Florida?
Yes.
Once you got here, did you obtain counsel?
I did.
And do you recall how the discussion between you and your attorney and the state started?
Yeah, I met with my attorney and suggested, potentially seeing what was to be offered, if I helped.
So your attorney on your behalf made an offer to the state?
I'm not really sure how the process works, but
I guess the better question I should have asked is, did you want to cooperate with the state?
yes.
Did anybody in law enforcement tell you to cooperate?
No.
I mean, at that point.
Yeah, no.
Did anybody in law enforcement during that initial discussion with your attorneys, did they tell you what to say?
No.
And so after you told your attorneys that you wanted to cooperate, did you then have an opportunity to meet with the state attorney's office?
Yes.
And do you recall who was there at that meeting?
Both detectives, Labid and Downs, you were there. I believe Miss Ross was there. Myself and my attorney,
And
paralegal.
was that the first meeting?
Yes.
And what was the purpose of that first meeting?
For you to get an idea of what I had to offer, and for me to get an idea of what you had to.
And did you tell us the truth?
Not in the beginning.
Started out with a lie?
Well, it started out with the truth, but it got off in the middle, and then those lies were corrected. I told the truth before the end of that statement.
Now, did you understand, do you understand the gravity of a meeting between you and your attorneys and assistant state attorneys and law enforcement under those circumstances?
Yes.
But you still told a lie.
Yes.
Why?
I still struggled with my own personal involvement in it, the physical part of it, and that's where I got off. I just couldn't quite let go of all of that, and I took a break. I talked to my attorney. I prayed.
Judge, Your Honor, will we approach?
Sure.
Okay, so during that initial meeting, you told us that you started out lying to us and you took a break
Yes.
and met with your attorneys.
Yes.
And then did you decide to tell the truth?
I did.
And then after that initial meeting, that proffer, was there another meeting between the same parties a month or two later?
Yes.
And at that point, you provided a sworn statement.
Yes.
Did you tell the truth then?
Yes.
All right, so do you understand that if you don't tell the truth today, there are ramifications?
Yes.
Do you know Marc Sievers?
I do.
How do you know him?
We met in high school, I believe. It was either 9th or 10th grade. And we've maintained a friendship over the years.
If you don't mind my asking, how old are you?
51.
And I'm guessing you were in high school between the ages of 14 and 18?
Yes.
Do you recall how old you were when you met Mr. Sievers?
It was either 9th or 10th grade. So I think graduation is 17, isn't it? Somewhere in there. So I'd have been 15 or 16 probably.
How did you meet?
We had girlfriends that were friends. We met through them.
And when you met Mr. Sievers, did the two of you instantly become close friends, or were you just acquaintances who grew closer together as time passed?
I think the friendship has just grown. I mean, we met, we got along, had things in common, so I mean, we kind of, you know.
What happened after high school? Did the two of you stay close after high school?
We did. At one point, well, when we kind of hit the college age, we kind of went different ways. We still stayed in contact, but something had happened during that time period, a few years there, that Marc got to where he was very difficult to be around.
Let me ask you, now let me just ask you a question. Did your friendship stay the same after high school?
No.
It changed.
Yes.
Now, when you were in high school, were you in when you and Mr. Sievers were in high school? Were you in Missouri?
Yes.
What part of Missouri were you in?
We went to high school in Imperial, which is just south of St. Louis.
And so the two of you were living in a school district near that?
I'm sorry, I said the wrong town. It's Arnold, not Imperial.
Okay, so you lived in Arnold, Missouri?
I lived in Imperial, but we went to school in Arnold.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
no problem. Two of you lived in the same school district?
Yes.
When your friendship changed after high school, did you still stay in close touch, or was it intermediate touch? An intermediate contact, I guess.
Well, we went to different schools and things, so the frequency of our contact was less, obviously, but yeah, we still got together. I would go out. He lived on campus, and I would go out sometimes on the weekends and hang out.
So, when you said earlier you did some college, Mr. Sievers also went to college?
Yes.
And you went to different colleges?
Yes.
Did the two of you have the kind of friendship where people spend time in each other's homes,
Yes.
spend their free time together?
Yes.
Was your friendship the kind of close friendship where you might tell secrets to one another, confide in one another?
Yes.
Did you confide in Mr. Sievers?
Yes.
And did he confide in you?
Yes.
Now, you said earlier that you kind of grew apart. How long, what was the time period that the two of you kind of, where your friendship changed and you weren't as close as you used to be?
It was a few years.
And then at some point, did the two of you get close again as
Yeah.
friends?
Yes.
When was that in relation to 2015?
The time when we got close again,
Yes.
early 90s.
Now, you told us earlier that you'd been married twice before.
Yes.
Did Mr. Sievers come to any of your weddings?
Well, my first wedding we had in my house. It was a private, family only. The second one was pretty similar. It was just a couple people. But my wife now is the one that we had a real wedding. So yes.
And so your most recent wedding, your third wedding, was one that Mr. Sievers came to.
Yes.
Did Mr. Sievers ever get married?
Yes.
Did you ever go to his wedding?
I did.
Who did he marry?
Teresa Sievers. I don't know what her maiden name was.
At the time, you just knew her as Teresa?
Actually, I didn't know her at all. We got introduced at the wedding, so.
So prior to the wedding, Mr. Sievers hadn't told you about his fiancée?
Yeah, that was kind of during one of those times when we were talking less often. Not because we had problems, but he had moved to Florida, so that changed our,
So he had moved to Florida, he was kind of getting on with his life, and you were getting on with yours?
Yes. Both of our marriages, my first marriage, were within, the same year for sure, but I think within like 6 months of each other.
And you said right around the 90s or so, the two of you kind of were close again.
Yes.
And did you have the same kind of friendship where You would confide in one another, trust each other with secrets?
Yes. I think that, if you don't mind, if I can clarify something.
Okay.
I think when we were in high school, I think the relationship was less deep. So the confiding in part of it really probably didn't happen until we got close after that.
Until you got older?
Yeah.
Had you ever spent time with Mr. Sievers and his family?
Yes.
Where?
When we were in school, I spent time with him, with his family, and when we were still up in Missouri.
Okay. And then what about his current family? Well, Dr. Sievers and his daughters, did you ever spend time with them?
I did. I didn't spend much time with all of them together, but I spent quite a bit of time with Marc and the children.
And did you mentioned your youngest was 16?
Yes.
Did your youngest ever associate with Mr. Sievers' daughters?
Yeah. My youngest and his oldest are within a few months of each other from the same age. So when Marc would travel to Missouri, he always had the girls with him. So we tried to always get together. And,
At some point, did you ever develop also a business relationship with Marc Sievers and Teresa Sievers?
yes.
Can you explain what kind of business relationship you had with them?
Well, their business obviously was a medical practice. They have the software that they use for their patient management system. That software has to be maintained. There's a constant change in like procedure codes and billing codes and things like that. So that software has to be upgraded periodically. There's hardware updates and repairs and just general maintenance and tech support. So they had hired a company to do that for them. They weren't happy with them, I think, both with the price and with the quality of the service. Marc asked me if it was something I could help them with.
Now, how do you help? At the time, was Dr. Sievers' medical practice here in Florida?
Yes.
And were you still living in Missouri?
Yes.
So how do you help somebody maintain a computer when the computer is all the way down in Florida and you're in Missouri?
Well, we have lots of tools for doing remote configuration and support. There was a couple, 2 or 3 instances where I actually physically had to be here, but other than that, it was all done remotely and on the phone. I could either log in and do it myself, or I could log in and explain to somebody else how to do it or help them do whatever it is they're trying to do.
So when you say remotely, were you ever able to manipulate the medical practice computers from Missouri?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't really explain that. That's what I meant by remotely. I could take control of any of the machines in the office. The majority of what I did, though, was on the server itself. So it was took care of backups and just, like I said, any kind of upgrades or anything that needed to be done.
Now, and you said sometimes you could do stuff by phone.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, as far as like the tech support, if they're having a trouble printing or Marc's pretty handy with stuff like that. So a lot of the smaller type things he could take care of himself.
So did Mr. Sievers ever call you and ask you for help doing something on a computer at the medical practice?
Yeah, all the time.
And then you'd kind of talk him through it?
Yeah, if I wasn't somewhere where I could actually access the system, I would do that. I had it set up on my phone where I could actually even take control of the machines from my cell phone. It's kind of hard to work with a small screen, so in those situations, I would usually view the screen and then walk somebody through it on the phone with what to do so they could do it themselves. I was watching them then.
Now, we said that this was kind of a business relationship, so, did you get paid for your work?
Not at first, but yeah, we eventually entered into an agreement.
And what was the agreement for the work?
$100 a month.
Was there ever like a contract or anything written?
Not a written contract, no.
An old school gentleman's agreement?
I did it because he asked me to.
And did Mr. Sievers pay you the $100 per month as you agreed?
Yes.
Did you get paid every month or in increments?
No, it was kind of sporadic, so it was whenever it was a good time for them to pay. If money was tight, I'd wait, and sometimes they paid me early, so.
When you say money was tight, was your money situation tight?
Yeah, once I became disabled, I mean, I had limited income. I meant their money.
Did you ever communicate with Mr. Sievers that you had been disabled and your income was limited?
I mean, like I said, our friendship has, been ongoing. Marc's probably more familiar with some of my medical history than I am probably.
You spent a lot of time talking to him about your medical situation?
Yeah, I mean, Marc's the kind of person that'll take it on himself to look things up, and if he thinks he can help you, he would do it.
And did he do that for you sometimes?
Yes.
Did you ever get medical help from Dr. Sievers?
Yes.
Certainly, I guess the first question is,
It was
did you ever come
informal.
down and do a full exam?
No.
Or did she sometimes help you?
Yes. Usually it was through Marc, but
And up until June of 2015, how long had you been working with the Seavers medical practice computers?
I'm not sure on the exact time range, but it was 2 to 3 years probably in whatever capacity.
And after you were taken into custody in Missouri, did you continue working on the computers?
No,
Were you able to?
no. By the time I got arrested, I think everything was pretty well shut down, so there wouldn't have been anything to do, even if I could.
Did you receive payment for your services rendered to the Sievers medical practice in 2015?
Yes.
And how did they pay you?
It was, I think all of them were through the company checks, but I'm not sure of that.
You got checks? How did you get them?
You can mail them.
They came to you in the mail?
Yes.
If I could ask Madam Clerk's assistance with State's Exhibits number 60 and which also I believe will have 60A. And while she's doing that, I'll just ask more questions. All right, so let's talk about your wedding. Who did you marry?
Angela?
And is she now Angela Wright?
Yes.
And you told us earlier that the wedding was on, you said May 2nd
Yes.
of 2015?
Yes.
And where was the wedding held?
It was at a park. We rented a pavilion and a gazebo and had a big cookout after the ceremony, so we made a day of it.
And was that in Missouri or here in Florida?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, in Missouri. The town was called DeSoto.
And how many people were invited to that wedding?
I'm not sure. My wife kind of went crazy on that, I think.
Okay.
Probably 125 people.
And did you invite Mr. Sievers to participate in that wedding?
Yes, I did.
What was his role?
We didn't have like a normal formal wedding where there were groomsmen and bridesmaids and things like that, but I had two people in my wedding. I considered them both best men.
And so Mr. Sievers was a groomsman. You invited him to be a groomsman in your wedding?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, a best man. I had two.
Who was the other best man?
Tommy Martin.
Was Mr. Martin a friend of yours?
Yes.
So did Mr. Sievers actually arrive in Missouri to come to your wedding?
Yes.
Do you recall when he arrived?
Let's see. The wedding was Saturday, so Friday we got together at my house. Thursday was so I don't know, Wednesday or Thursday. I'm not sure what the dates were
Okay.
prior to the wedding.
So you said Saturday was May 2nd?
Yes.
So, okay. The 1st, then the 30th, and then the 29th. So it would have been either the 30th or the 29th, as far as you know?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Did Mr. Sievers stay with you in Missouri, or did he have anywhere else to stay?
The night before the wedding, he stayed with us. That's why I wasn't sure about what day he actually got there, because he owns a condominium that was rented out, and he has a lot of things that were still stored there. So the day before we all got together, he spent that day at the condo cleaning. And that night, I believe.
Okay, so before you and your guests got together at your house, Mr. Sievers stayed at the condo he owned up in Missouri.
Yes, that was my understanding.
And what was the purpose of the gathering at your house?
We had a lot of people in from out of town. I shouldn't say a lot. We had other couples from out of town. So our wedding was at noon in the park, so we thought it would be better if we got everybody together the day before. We all hung out, had a cookout, and then that night we had a combined bachelorette party where we all went out together to a karaoke bar.
You mentioned at the beginning of our discussion that you and Jimmy killed Dr. Sievers.
Physically, yes.
Jimmy who?
Jimmy Rogers.
Was Jimmy Rogers a guest at the wedding festivities that weekend?
Yes.
What was your relationship with Mr. Rogers?
His friends.
Was your friendship with Mr. Rogers the same kind of friendship that you had with Mr. Sievers?
No.
Had your friendship with him lasted as long as the friendship you had with Mr. Sievers?
No.
Did Mr. Rogers bring a friend or a date with him to the festivities?
Yes.
Who did he bring?
Taylor Schumacher. I'm not sure how it's pronounced.
And Taylor is a man or a woman?
It's a woman.
It's like a girlfriend or something?
Yes. They actually they were engaged and they have a baby together, so.
Did Mr. Sievers bring Dr. Sievers with him?
No.
Did he bring his daughters?
No.
Came by himself?
Yes.
So, the night of the wedding festivities, the night before you got married, you said there was a cookout at your home?
Yeah, it was kind of in the afternoon, but yeah. And then we all went out that evening.
To your knowledge, had Mr. Rogers and Mr. Sievers ever met before?
No, not in person. Actually, not even on the phone. I'm sure that they both knew who each other were through me, just from conversations.
So you had talked to Mr. Sievers and mentioned a friend named Jimmy?
Yeah, I'm sure I did.
And you maybe had talked to Mr. Rogers and mentioned a friend named Marc.
I know that I had talked to Jimmy and mentioned Mark because we had so much interaction almost daily with between the work stuff.
And during the festivities at the cookout, did you ever see Mr. Sievers, Miss Schumacher, Mr. Rogers associating?
Yeah, I mean, everybody was talking. I wasn't really paying attention to anything that was said. I wasn't part of the conversations, but I mean, everybody was talking. I mean, it was just a hangout, you know.
Did Mr. Rogers and Mr. Sievers become friends that night?
I wouldn't think that would be called a friendship, but
Probably not. Did you and, I think I asked you before whether you had the same kind of friendship with Mr. Rogers as you did with Mr. Sievers. Did you confide in Mr. Rogers about things?
not really.
And did he confide in you?
Yeah.
Had you met his lady friend Taylor Showmaker prior to your wedding festivities?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 60A, 60B, and 60C.
I haven't seen all of them.
All right, I'm going to show you 60B, C, and D, and ask if you recognize those.
For the record, all prior objections made pursuant to our business records objection.
Noted for the record.
Okay.
Do you recognize them?
Yes.
What are they?
Checks that I got from the support that I did for the Seavers.
And they're checks that were made out to you?
Yes.
Did you cash them?
Hold on one moment. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'm soft-spoken anyway, but I'm kind of hoarse, so.
Let's not have any discussion with the members of the jury.
Would some water help?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I just ask that you speak up as much as you can.
Okay,
Does that microphone up there, does that move?
it does, but I'm pretty close to it already. I kept hearing it start to ring whenever I tried to get real close. Thank you.
Okay, so getting back to 60B, C, and D. Those are checks from the Seavers medical practice, I think you said?
Yes.
All right. And what were those checks for?
For the work I did at the Seavers, 2 of them were.
2 of them for work you did for the Seavers?
Yes.
Let's talk first about 60C. How much is that check for?
1,000.
And that's a $1,000 check from the Seavers medical practice to you?
Yes.
And what was the purpose of that $1,000 check?
It would have just covered whatever the months were. I mean, I don't, like I said, it wasn't broken down into set payments, so.
But it was for the payment for the services you rendered on the Sievers medical practice servers?
Yes,
Okay, what's 60 D?
it's a $400 check, the same.
And that was as well a payment for the services you rendered to the medical practice?
Yes,
What about 60 B?
B is a check that Mark sent me because I didn't have the money to cover the trip down to commit the crime.
Okay, so the $1,000 check and the $400 check were payments for the work you did on the servers,
Yes,
but the $600 check was for you to come down here to kill Dr. Sievers?
there was no money due, and at the point when he told me when that he wanted this done, I didn't have the extra money to make the trip. My car was in the shop. I needed to rent a car, so
Okay. And what bank are those checks drawn on?
Bank of America.
Or at this time, the state would admit as a self-authenticating business record, State's Exhibit number 68.
Your objection's noted for the record. We'll show it admitted.
And we also, for the record, would admit 60B, C, and D, which are from 60.
We'll show them admitted.
May I publish?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm going to show first 60B. All right, look it over. Okay, 60B. Can everybody see that? Do you see that, Mr. Wright? That's a check for, now zoom this in. 60B. What's the amount where I've got my finger here? What's that amount right there?
600.
600? And then 60C. All right, what's the amount where I've got my finger?
1,000.
And 60D.
400.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So if you were getting $100 per month for assisting the Seavers medical practice, was about $1,200 per year.
Yes,
So by June, what was it, June 9th, the day of that $600 check, you'd already been paid for the year.
yes.
And tell us what you did with the $600 that Mr. Sievers sent you.
I used 100 of it for the rental car, and the remaining 500 I used for the trip to pay for Jimmy and I to come down and back.
What kind of rental car did you get?
It was a Hyundai.
A Hyundai?
Yeah,
Recall what color it was?
I think it was white.
And in fact, between June 24th of 2015 and July 1st of 2015, how many rent-a-cars did you have?
2.
Why did you have two rent-a-cars?
Well, the first one came from the car accident. That's the shop, directed that. That was an enterprise. The second one, well, it was a 1 week rental, and when the rental was up, my car still wasn't ready, and the price was going to go up on it. So we switched rental car companies we found another one with the same price. So we switched to, I think it was a budget rental car.
The white one, the one that you had from the rental car company, from the enterprise rental car company?
Yes.
Is that the one you and Mr. Rogers drove down here in?
Yes,
And then when you got back to Missouri, you turned it in?
yes.
And did you go anywhere with the second rent-a-car?
My wife and I drove that back down for the funeral and to help the family with arrangements and things.
So after you were involved in the death of Dr. Sievers, you drove down to help her family?
Yes.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Let's talk a little bit more about the wedding, okay? So at some point prior to your wedding, did Mr. Sievers ask to speak with you?
You said prior to, right?
Prior to getting married,
Yes.
did Mr. Sievers ask to speak with you?
Yes.
And how did he ask to speak with you?
The night before he came to Missouri, he sent me a text message telling me that he had something personal that he needed to talk to me about. He didn't say what it was, but
Okay.
he said that he'd hoped that we'd have some time to be able to talk privately.
So you're getting married and Mr. Sievers wanted to talk to you about himself?
Yes.
And so you said earlier that he had arrived at some point, either the night before or 2 nights before the celebration at your home. Did he ever tell you why he wanted to speak with you?
Not until the night before the wedding or the day before the wedding when he came to the house with everybody else.
And was this by text message as well? Or in person?
Well, when he came to the house, we talked in person. So there wasn't anything else said about it until he came to the house.
All right, so and when he came to the house, and this is, again, the night before the wedding when you were having the festivities at your house,
Yes.
Mr. Sievers indicated that he wanted to talk to you about something.
Yes.
Did you actually get a chance to talk to him?
Yes.
And tell us how that conversation happened.
At some point during that afternoon, he asked me if we could go somewhere and talk privately. So we went back to my bedroom, closed the door where that could happen.
And when you went into your bedroom and closed the door, was there anybody in there with you?
No.
Just you and Mr. Sievers?
Yes. That's why we went to that bedroom.
And when the two of you went into your bedroom, was there anybody else present in your house?
There was a lot of people in and out of the house, between the yard and the house. I don't know who was there at the time, but
So this is the day you were entertaining guests at your home.
yeah.
And Mr. Sievers, you and Mr. Sievers separated yourselves from the rest of the group?
Yes.
All right, so when you're in your bedroom, what did you and Mr. Sievers, well, let me ask you this. Did he tell you what it was he texted you about wanting to talk to you about?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
He told me that he and Teresa were having problems, marital problems. He told me that she was having an affair, and that they were having financial problems as well. considering bankruptcy.
Did you believe Mr. Sievers when he was telling you these things?
Yes.
Did you have any proof that she was having an affair or that they were having any financial problems or anything like that?
No.
You took his word for it?
Yes.
What else did he tell you?
Well, we talked a little bit about, you know, just different options. It was a short conversation because we got interrupted. You know, at one point he said a hypothetical situation where if kids were going to be taken away and, you know, and put into some kind of danger, that if I knew somebody that would be willing to help him.
Help him how?
We didn't get into the specifics, but my take on it at the time was maybe to have this guy run off, beat up, you know, something.
So you thought that Mr. Sievers was hypothetically asking if you knew somebody who could beat somebody up for him?
Yes.
And how did you get interrupted?
People were looking for us. Obviously, there was a lot of people around.
Folks
So,
wanted to know why the two of you had
Nobody,
separated
yeah,
yourselves?
they couldn't find us, so they come looking.
Did you get an opportunity to speak with Mr. Sievers, or did Mr. Sievers seek an opportunity to speak with you again?
Yes.
When?
The next morning, when we were getting ready for the wedding.
The morning of your wedding?
Yes.
The morning of the wedding, of your wedding, Mr. Sievers wanted to talk to you again about his marriage?
Yes.
Where did that conversation happen?
At the park while we were getting ready. There was a point where it was just him and I again. So,
Okay. And what do you mean when you say when you say you were at the park getting ready? What does that mean?
I'm sorry. One of the reasons we had everybody at the house was so that we could all meet at the park the next morning, because it was an outside wedding, so we had to decorate, you know, and things. I borrowed chairs and tables from our church, and we had everybody had to come and set everything up. So Marc and I were actually I think we were actually getting dressed when this conversation happened, but it was while we were kind of getting things organized.
So it sounds like you kind of had a do-it-yourself wedding.
Yeah.
You assembled all the table and chairs yourself?
Yes.
Did you hire a caterer or?
No, I have a friend that owns a small grocery store. Name's TK. TK. Not sure what his real name is. But that's what he goes by. He because he's in the grocery business. He has a wholesale account at a restaurant supply place where they sell all the bulk food and things. So he had offered to let me use his account, his membership, to go and buy everything that we needed so we could buy it at wholesale. So that's how we got that.
Sorry. Getting it at wholesale meant that you got it at a discounted
Yes,
price?
yes. Much discounted.
Okay, so that Saturday now, you're out there at the park, you're getting things together as you were explaining for your wedding to your wife Angela.
Yes.
And I think you said you thought you and Mr. Sievers were getting dressed.
I think that's during the time when this conversation happened.
And what did he say at this time?
He brought the situation back up. This time he told me that Teresa was actually leaving him. The night before, it was just that she was having an affair. So at this point, it's getting a little more involved. He said that she was actually leaving him, that she was taking the children and taking them out of state.
Okay, so you at this time, your close friend, Mr. Sievers, is telling you on the day of your wedding that his wife's leaving him. Am I taking that correctly?
Yes.
Did you think he was kidding?
No.
What was his demeanor like? Did he appear serious?
Yes.
You told us earlier that two of you were close friends, so when he told you about this, did you believe he was telling you the truth?
Yes.
All right, so now he's telling you while you're getting ready, he's telling you he thinks his wife's leaving him.
No, not that he thinks. He said she was.
Okay. What else did he tell you?
He told me that that the kids were in danger if she took them. That he couldn't let that happen. We talked about some different options as far as the marriage goes. I mentioned that about fighting her legally for custody. He said that wasn't an option. He wasn't financially in a place that he could be able to fight her for that. Just a couple other different things. I think we talked about maybe counseling.
Did you, when you say counsel, I mean, did you have a friendly discussion with your friend about what efforts he should make to stay married?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be a good way to describe it. I mean, ways of saving the marriage.
During that part of the discussion, what else did Mr. Sievers tell you?
I believe he said that they tried counseling and it didn't work. We got interrupted. The reason I'm not sure what else was said, we got interrupted in the middle of that conversation. So.
And what was this interruption about?
On the way from my house to the park, I stopped by TK's to pick up the food because not only did he let me purchase all this food through his account, he let me store it in his walk-in cooler, in his walk-in freezer at the store. So I went by the store to pick up all the meat on the way to the park. Thought we had everything, but once we got down there and people started getting ready to start cooking and things, we realized that there was like a whole case of meat missing.
All right, so, and your friend TK, he's in the food business as well himself?
Yes, he's got a deli in the store. It's kind of like a Quickie Mart kind of thing.
All right, so you and Mr. Sievers get interrupted again because there's a tray of meat missing. What does that mean for you?
Well, it could mean big trouble. The first thing I did was I called TK and asked him if he could check in his cooler and see if I missed something. He went and looked and said, yeah, that there was a box sitting in there. Somehow it got missed.
All right, so how's that box going to get from TK's walk-in to your wedding at the park?
Well, somebody had to go pick it up.
Any volunteers?
Yeah, Marc offered to drive us over to pick it up.
So when you say Marc offered to drive us over,
I'm sorry, yeah.
does
Marc
that
offered
mean?
to take me to TK's to pick the meat up and bring it back.
he didn't offer to go get it for you?
No.
And how far was your friend TK's Quickie Mart from, you said, was it DeSoto Park? How
Yes,
far is the Quickie Mart from the DeSoto Park where you were at?
20 minutes at the most.
Are things close together or spread out in that part of Missouri where you're living at that time?
It's pretty rural. Everything seems to be 20 minutes from.
All right, so Mr. Sievers volunteered to drive you back over to TK's Quickie Mart to pick up the box of meat you left there?
Yes,
And did you in fact take the ride with Mr. Sievers to pick up the meat?
yes.
Other than you and Mr. Sievers, did anybody else go with you?
No,
Just the two of you?
yes.
and it was in a vehicle that he had?
Yeah, I think it was a rental car that he got when he got down here, or got up there.
And on the way to TK's to pick up the meat, did y'all have another discussion?
Yes.
And what was that discussion about?
It was a continuation of the same conversation. So he brought it up again, told me, that she was leaving him, that he couldn't let her take the kids away from him, and again said that they were in danger, some kind of danger, without him there to be able to protect them.
Did he ask you to do anything?
Yeah, we talked about some more. This really, it was the same options, just brought back up. And when we kind of exhausted that, he told me that really the only option that he had was for her to die. And he said that he needed to have her killed.
Okay, so on your wedding day, on your drive to pick up meat for your wedding, Mr. Sievers is telling you that he wants to have his wife killed.
Yes, he asked me to help him.
I mean, what kind of help was he asking for? Was he asking you to do it yourself, or what? Like, what kind of help could he be possibly asking his friend for?
Well, it was pretty direct. He asked me if I would kill her or take care of it.
And what was your response when he asked you to help him kill his wife?
I was surprised at first.
I mean, were the two of you that close, Mr. Wright, that, I mean, Mr. Sievers could ask you to kill his wife and you would actually consider it?
Yes. I mean, definitely the asking part. I question whether or not actually doing it should have been part of the friendship, but
Let's just say it shouldn't have been. Let's just say that, okay? It shouldn't have been. We'll just all agree to that. All right, so during this conversation between the park and TK's, you said now Mr. Sievers wants your help having his wife killed.
yes.
Did y'all discuss whatever it was that you were supposed to do to make this happen for him?
Not specifically. When he asked, I asked what kind of time frame he was looking at. He said that as soon as possible. I'm not sure if she had told him when she was leaving, but it seemed to sound like it was coming up soon.
So you had the impression that he needed this to happen sooner rather than later? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely. I think ASAP was actually the term he used.
So did you actually agree to help Mr. Sievers on this drive to TK's to pick up the meat? Did you actually agree to kill Dr. Sievers?
Well, it was left with, I would see what I could do. I didn't really see myself personally doing it, but part of the way that it was asked was if I could make sure it got done. So it was a matter of.
This was on the day of your wedding, May 2nd, 2015?
Yes.
And the requests to speak with you about it happened the day before and the day before that? The first text about wanting to
Yes.
speak with you
Yeah.
was 2 days before that?
Yes.
And the first conversation at your house was on May 1st?
Yes.
Okay, so at any point during the drive, either to TK's, and I'm guessing it was another 20 minutes back to the park,
Yes.
After you picked up the meat?
Yes.
Did you actually go back to the park?
Yes.
Did you agree to actually kill Dr. Sievers?
No, it was left with I would see what I could do. I had asked him about, if this was going to happen, what kind of money would be available. So he had told me that it was that they had a lot of insurance on her. A lot is what he said. He didn't tell me any amounts, but he said that there was a lot of insurance, that him and the kids would be well taken care of, and that he had at least $100,000 to offer to have it done.
So, Mr. Sievers was he offering you $100,000 to kill Dr. Sievers, or was he offering $100,000 to whoever did it?
Well, he if it wasn't going to be me personally, I was going to be the middle person. So he didn't want, if there was someone else involved, he didn't want him to know who he was.
So you were going to get $100,000
Yeah.
and then maybe subcontract out the
Yes.
killing.
Yes. The specifics of how that would be given we didn't talk about. So I don't know if it was going to be all cash or if it would be some property. I wasn't sure.
Did you believe that if you did what Mr. Sievers was asking of you, that you would actually get paid somehow?
Yes.
You trusted him to do that?
Yes.
Was there ever a discussion between the two of you on your wedding day about how the two of you would communicate with each other when he returned back to Florida?
Yeah, while we were still in the car on the way back, kind of after we had talked about everything else, he said that that we couldn't talk about this on our regular cell phones once he left,
Why not?
just because it's not secure. It would be our everyday phones we both used for everything, so didn't want any of that being involved on our cell phones, our regular phones. He suggested using like the anonymous prepaid calls, like the Go phones from Walmart. He told me that when he got home, he was going to go get one, and that he would wanted me to do the same.
Now, at this point now, we're still on your wedding day, May 2nd, 2015.
Yes.
So now you have a plan for secure communications with Go phones. Had you agreed at this point that you were going to help Marc Sievers kill Dr. Teresa Sievers?
No.
You were considering it though, right?
It was left with I would see what I could do.
Okay. And then, so, did you actually get married?
Yes.
And did you have any more discussions with Mr. Sievers about this request of his on May 2nd?
No.
When was the next time you had a discussion with him about it?
An actual discussion or any communication? I'm not sure which.
I'll use the more broad term. When was the next time you had communication with him about it?
There was some text, vague stuff, text messages, phone call about whether or not he got the phone. A couple of days after he got home, he got his phone, or the next day, I'm not sure which, but he went ahead and went and got a phone. And then he sent me, I think it was a card, but he sent me a card in the mail that had the phone number to his prepaid call, or his prepaid phone number in it.
So he wanted you to have the phone number for his disposable phone?
Yes.
Was it still May of 2015, or had it become June yet?
Oh no, this was May 5th or something like that. It was just a couple of days after he got back that he had the phone. And then He said, then he mailed me the information.
So, you told us earlier that you were disabled, and your finances weren't the best. Did you want to get $100,000 from Mr. Sievers?
Money would have been good.
So, did you ever actually make a decision about whether or not he was going to get the help from you that he was asking for?
Yes, I did.
When did you make that decision?
It was a couple of weeks after the wedding before I actually made the commitment. I didn't get a phone, a second phone, right away. Some of the communication between us was asking if I had my phone yet. I delayed doing that because I wasn't sure what my involvement, or if any, would be.
Now, you told us, and I'm going to step back for a minute, because you told us earlier, at the beginning of your testimony, that you and Jimmy Rogers came down and did this. So, how did Jimmy Rogers, if you and Marc Sievers are having these discussions about the death of his wife, how did Jimmy Rogers get involved?
Jimmy, and a little bit of background, Jimmy has let me know in the past that he's.
Overruled.
Jimmy has let me know in the past that his past criminal activity, that he's been involved in things like this. So, so the only person that I know that might have wanted to be involved in this would have been Jimmy. So that's why the 2-week period was significant, because I got my cell phone, my other phone, the anonymous call phone, the anonymous phone. We referred to them as our other phones, just so that you kind of keep it straight. I got my other phone on May 17th, and I got it right after I spoke to Jimmy. I went and talked to Jimmy in person, and told him that, there was a job, not specifics about who or anything, but made sure that it was something he wanted to get involved in. He was on board. So
Jimmy Rogers is a contract killer?
I don't know that I would call him that, but I know that he's been involved in other deaths. So
You thought he was some kind of tough guy?
well, I believe that he was somebody that would actually do it. So
Okay. Now, when you talked to Mr. Rogers about, you said there was a job, right? When you talked to him, did you tell Mr. Sievers that you were talking to Jimmy Rogers?
no.
Did you tell Jimmy Rogers that you had been talking to Marc Sievers?
No. Marc didn't want anybody else to know. If there was someone else involved, he didn't want to know who it was, and didn't want that person to know who he was. I was an in-between person. So there was never any direct communication between the two of them.
Okay, so you said after speaking with Mr. Rogers, you made the decision to do this?
Yes.
And when you made this decision, were you going to hire Mr. Rogers to do it for you, or were you going to participate in the crime yourself?
I wasn't sure how much I would personally be involved in it in the beginning. I had hired him to do it or help get it done. So
that was going to be my next question. If Jimmy Rogers didn't know about Marc Sievers, and if Marc Sievers didn't know about Jimmy Rogers, then how was Jimmy Rogers going to get paid?
it would have been through me. I would have been the one paying Jimmy.
Were you going to pay Jimmy Rogers $100,000?
I was going to split with Jimmy whatever cash portion of the payment was. Since that was an unknown, there wasn't a set amount that I wanted to promise.
Okay, so you talked earlier about the word other phones. Why is the word other significant when referring to the burner phones you were telling us about?
Well, I mean, Marc or I, either one, are like into this type of criminal activity. So I've heard lots of terms since this happened. The burner phones and I forget. There's 2 or 3 other terms I've heard used for those kind of phones, but we said other. It was our other phone. I mean, just literally.
Was there any discussion between the two of you about, the two of you ever discuss any codes that you might use to let you know whose phone to call or whose phone to use?
Yes, come up with the plan, and he let me know that since we weren't going to have these phones turned on all the time, that if we needed to talk to each other privately or anything to do with the crime itself, that we would use the word other in a text between our regular phones. So that was kind of the code to tell us to, turn on the phone and be waiting for a call.
So if, for example, you sent a message to Mr. Sievers with the word other in it, that was a message to him to activate his other phone?
Yes,
And vice versa, if he sent a message to you with the word other in it, he was telling you to activate your other phone?
yes.
Okay, so, did you and Mr. Sievers ever decide on how, when, where Dr. Sievers' life was supposed to end?
Yeah, once I had gotten my phone in place and we both had each other's numbers, all of the planning of this was all done on those other phones. So we kind of skipped a little bit of that. I don't know if you're coming back to it.
We're going to get to it.
Okay.
Did you and Mr. Sievers decide on a time and place and on how this was going to happen?
Yes, there were multiple places that were potential that he had brought to me as these are his ideas of where and how it should happen. It wasn't until a couple weeks before the trip that time period was actually chosen.
And were these discussions using your other phones, were these text message discussions, or were you actually talking on the other phones?
We were actually talking. I think the only texts that were done on them was the very first, probably 2. The one that's how I gave him my phone number. My other phone number was I texted my number to his other, and then let him know on his regular phone to check his other. So
You sent a message that said something like check other?
I'm not sure what it was, but yeah, it would have been something like that.
Okay, so let's talk about the planning. You said the two of you had voice communications over the other phones on how this was supposed to happen. Did you initially come up with this plan for Dr. Sievers to die at her home the way she did, or was there some other plan?
That was one of the two, I don't know if I should call them plans, but one of the 2 options. or locations, I should say, that there were possibilities.
What were some of the other possibilities? And let me be sure that I'm getting this correctly. These are conversations between you and Marc Sievers about
Yes.
possibilities,
Yes,
and not you and Jimmy Rogers.
right.
What were these other possibilities for how Dr. Sievers was supposed to die?
Well, initially, Mark's idea was that it would happen at the office, at the medical office, when she got off work, because she generally worked late and usually come out by herself. It's a kind of, the office is off the road quite a bit, so it's kind of a secluded area back there. I thought that would be an ideal place for a mugging to happen. There was his suggestion was either to, well, it would be for this to happen as soon as she left work. She had to walk along the side of the building up to the parking lot to get to her car. He had given me, he had me pull up aerial photos, like from Google Maps or something, so that he could talk me through what he was talking about. He showed me where there's a side entrance where a stairwell comes down. That's where she exited at. So he gave me the code, the push button code to that door, so that I could either wait inside the stairwell, or the other option was right outside of that door. There was, and I don't know if it was trash cans or air conditioners or something, but there was a barricade around that. So it was you had to it was a blind spot where you had to walk past once you left that door.
Now, had you ever been to that medical office before?
I had, but I'd never been in that side area.
And what was the purpose for your prior visit to that medical office?
Working on the computers.
And when you went to work on the computers, did you go in some other entrance or something?
Yeah, there's like two main entrances, but there's a front entrance that you go in where the lobby's at, and then you go up that way. Their office was on the upper floor. So I had never been, anytime I was there, I was always with Marc, and we came in the front and left that way. So I wasn't, I'd been to the office, but their office wasn't the only one in that building. So I was familiar with the office, but not really the whole building.
Okay.
So,
And how did when you said he showed you these things on Google Maps, were you in Missouri when he was doing this?
yeah, I pulled it up. He must have had it pulled up on his end as well, but I was looking at the aerial photo, and he was talking me through the plan.
When you pulled up the Google Maps, did you use some kind of electronic device to do it?
Yeah, it would have been a computer, a tablet, phone, something. I'm not sure which it was at the time, but
Did you have all the above? Computer, tablet, or phone?
yeah, I had access to a lot of equipment.
So you don't remember which one you used?
Leading?
Do you remember which one, I'll rephrase, do you remember which device you used to look up Google Maps?
No, I don't.
Okay, so all these discussions are being had on the other phones. During these discussions on the other phones, were you still doing work for the Seavers medical practice?
Yes.
What kind of work were you doing during these discussions?
It was mostly just technical support, making sure backups were being done, things like that. But if somebody was having a problem, multiple times we had problems with the fax system for the.
And when you say had problems with the fax, you mean FAX?
Oh yes, I'm
Facsimile.
sorry. Yes, FAX.
Okay, not the FACTS.
Right. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
So you had problems with the fax, or whatever was controlling the fax machine?
Yeah, with the way the medical stuff works, the labs are still operating on fax machines, not physical machines that print out paper, but they're computer faxes, fax modems. So but the software answers the phone and then it files it, and so when those test results come back in, they get all that stuff goes into the medical software.
So, let me understand let me see if I understand this. So, you're still working for the Sievers medical practice, but you've also got this other plan that's going on with Mr. Sievers.
Yes.
And your work for the Sievers medical practice, did you have any travel plans the summer of 2015 to come to the Sievers medical practice for some reason?
Yeah, there was a major upgrade that needed to happen on the servers, on the software. I say on the server, it wasn't hardware, it was software upgrades, because the procedural, or all the procedure codes, my understanding of what it was the procedure codes for like what test procedures that you have done, or any of the communication between like the hospitals and all of that. Everything's done on codes with the insurance and things. So there was a major upgrade. A bunch of that had changed. And so it was kind of a mandatory upgrade that had to happen. And I was going to need to be there in person to do that.
Now, if you told us earlier that Mr. Sievers has sent you the $600 for you and Mr. Rogers to come down here and kill Dr. Sievers because you didn't have the money. So how were you going to get here to do that upgrade?
Well, any time that I've had to come down, Marc's taking care of all my expenses. So if I flew down, they bought the airfare, took care of any of my expenses. So.
Had you made a plan yet for that trip to come down and do that upgrade?
I had planned the trip, but I hadn't firmed up, like I hadn't coordinated with Marc what weekend we were going to do it, because it needed to happen on a weekend, because I needed to be, the office needed to be offline for when I was working on it. So they were closed a half a day on Friday and closed Saturday and Sunday. So any weekend would have been fine.
And so had you actually planned the day that you were going to come down and do that upgrade?
Yeah, I had kind of picked that same weekend, unfortunately, to come down. I hadn't made those arrangements with Marc, but that's kind of my planning was going around that. The upgrade had to be in place. I think it was August. I don't know if it was the beginning or the end now, but I believe it was August that upgrade had to be up and operational. So it had to happen sometime, within those couple months. And I didn't want to wait till the very last minute to do it.
So did you tell people in Missouri that you were coming down here, coming to Florida to do some work?
Yes, I did.
Now, at some point, did Mr. Sievers get with you about a date or dates where Dr. Sievers was supposed to die?
Yes.
When did he get with you about that?
I'm not sure. I'm not certain of the time frame, but I think it was maybe a couple weeks before. There was a trip. He told me that they had a family trip. They were all going out of town to New York or Connecticut, or I can't remember where the family's from, but they were all getting together with Teresa's family. He told me that Teresa was going to be returning home on Sunday night, late Sunday night by herself, and that Marc and the kids were staying for an extra 3 days. They'd be back on Wednesday.
And so that weekend, the weekend Dr. Sievers would be home that Sunday night, when she'd be home by herself, was when this was supposed to happen?
Yeah. We didn't talk about that, but when you asked me about, in these phone conversations, what the options were, the office was one of them. The other was the house. So the issue with it being at the house would be coordinating it so that Marc and the kids weren't there, to make sure that there was no danger for them. So that was a concern with the house situation. but he said that if it were to happen at the house, we could coordinate that he would leave the alarm off and the doors unlocked and things like that. One of my concerns was with the office location. His suggestion was to use a gun, and my concern was that when I told him, he said that she leaves by herself most of the time. So when I told him my concern about whether or not she would, what would happen if she wasn't by herself. He told me that there couldn't be any witnesses, and it would have to be collateral damage and to kill the person that was with her, and that wasn't an option for me.
Well, are you supposed to have a gun?
No, I'm a felon, so.
I mean, you're not supposed to kill people either, but you're not supposed to have a gun,
No.
are you?
No. And
Okay.
so from the very beginning, when the gun was brought up, I mean, I don't own a gun, and I'm not gonna be traveling across state lines with a gun in the car, so,
Was Mr. Rogers also a felon?
yes.
So driving from Missouri to Florida with a gun or guns in the car, is that a good idea for the both of you?
No.
All right, so you still hadn't solidified at this point with Mr. Sievers as to whether or not this thing was supposed to happen at the office or at the home.
Right. When the trip got planned, that eliminated the issue with him and the girls being in any danger. So he told me that that's when he wanted it done. That either Sunday when she got home, or Monday or Tuesday when she left work, as long as it was done before he got back.
So either Sunday, June 28th, Monday, June 29th, or Tuesday, June 30th.
Yes. So he told me that he was leaving everything leaving the side door unlocked. He gave me the code to open the garage door opener and to turn off the alarm. He said the alarm wouldn't be armed anyway, but he gave me the code.
You
But-
didn't have the code, you haven't been given the alarm code before when you visited the Sievers family?
No, I had no reason to ever have that.
Overruled.
I was always with Marc. I had no reason to have that.
Okay, so, in the meantime, did you also simultaneously have, well, strike that. While you and Mr. Sievers were planning, now you plan to come down on June 28th, did you also make plans with Jimmy Rogers for the trip?
Yes.
And what were those plans?
Well, I mean, the plans for the trip were made from the beginning, but as far as that time slot, I told Jimmy that that's when we needed to go. And I mean, are you asking me the specifics about how the trip happened?
Well, I guess
I'm
I'm
not-
asking if you and Mr. Rogers if you also made plans with Mr. Rogers for him to come down with you. It's a better question.
Yes.
Did you also make plans, thanks for helping me. Did you also make plans with Mr. Rogers for that trip on the weekend of Sunday, June 28th?
Yes.
And at this point, had you told Mr. Sievers about Mr. Rogers' agreement?
No, I never did.
Had you told Mr. Rogers about Mr. Sievers at this point?
I didn't have any intention on him finding out who it was, but he figured it out. So, yes, we did have a discussion, but it wasn't until right before we left, or within a week or so before we left. And at that point, he said he already knew who it was. So that's the reason we had the conversation.
All right, so now that you and Mr. Sievers have decided on at least the range of dates of the murder, did you and Mr. Rogers then set out to come to Florida?
Yes.
When did you leave Missouri to come to Florida?
We left Saturday morning, around 8 o'clock in the morning. Not sure the date, I'm sorry. But it was the Saturday, so it would have been 27th.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that you had a white Elantra from Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Was that the car you drove down in, or did you drive in a different car?
Yeah, that was the car. The first rental car is the one that we came down in. Jimmy and I did.
And, all right, so you had decided at this point you couldn't travel with guns. Did you bring any weapons with you to
No.
do the crime with?
No. Marc's idea was that if it was going to happen at the house, that, that he thought that making it look like she came home and interrupted a burglary in progress or something like that. So I would think the weapon would be something that was at the house, is how I looked at it. So we didn't bring any weapons with us.
When you say we didn't bring any weapons with you, does that include Mr. Rogers?
Yes, we as Mr. Rogers and I, yeah.
Did he bring anything with him to Florida?
Yes.
What did he bring?
He brought two these like one-piece coveralls. They were something he used at work, but he brought those. Brought duct tape, latex gloves, industrial kind.
What's the purpose of bringing coveralls to Florida in June?
Not to leave evidence.
Okay, so you and Mr. Rogers were going to use these coveralls to commit the crime at the Sievers home?
Yes.
And the gloves and duct tape were also somehow going to be used with the suits?
Yes, I didn't actually realize he brought those things until we were on the way down. But yeah, when he showed them to me, he was talking about that you put the gloves on, the suit on, then you can duct tape the cuffs of both the ankles and the arms to make sure hair doesn't fall out or something.
So Mr. Rogers explained to you how to use the suits to avoid contamination?
Yes.
Had you been to the place where Mr. Rogers works
No,
or was working at the time?
but I had seen the suits before.
Had you been trained in decontamination procedures or anything like that?
No.
All right, so you left Missouri Saturday to come to Florida on the Elantra with Mr. Rogers. Did you drive all the way down here, or did you stop on the way?
No, we stopped quite a few times, but we drove straight through. I mean,
I guess the better question is did you stop and spend the night anywhere?
no, it was just rest stops and gas stations.
And did you actually arrive in Fort Myers?
Yes,
About what time?
it was 6. I'm not sure the exact time, but it was about 6 o'clock in the morning, Sunday morning.
And when you arrived in Fort Myers, where was the first place that you went?
We got off the highway on Bonita Beach Road. Bonita Beach is one of the beaches that I know where things are at. So I'm not real familiar with this area, but I know where some of the main things are. And so that happened to be the exit we got off on, which is also the exit that Marc's house is right off of. So we got off the highway and we were headed towards the beach, and I pointed the house out to Jimmy, and then we made the decision to stop and check it out. Since it was 6 in the morning, there was nobody out in their yards or up, and wanted to see the house. I knew where the house was at and how it was laid out, but Jimmy needed to see how the house was laid out. We needed to check. One of the things Marc did, told me that he did as part of the preparation, was there was some brush. I'm not sure exactly what it was. Something that would scratch you. Or, they have a tall privacy fence, a nylon fence, and there was a spot in the back where you could go over that fence. So his idea was to actually go over that fence and then enter the house through the side door of the garage. And he said that he trimmed back all that brush to make sure that nobody got scratched and left blood or something. So he said that he actually went over it himself to make sure that it was realistic.
So Mr. Sievers explained to you that he'd actually climbed over the fence in his yard to make sure that he didn't get scratched by the brush in the backyard?
Yes.
So at 6 o'clock in the morning on the Sunday, the 28th, when you arrived, did you use that method of entry, going over the fence, over the brush and in through the side door? Did you use
Hold on a
some?
moment. We need a restroom break? Okay. Stop right there. I'll instruct the jurors not to talk about the case with themselves or with anybody else or look up any people or places involved. We'll be with you momentarily. Please be seated. Ms. Parker?
Yes, Judge.
You're set for a sentencing next week, I think. Do you mind if we put that off?
I was gonna submit it every morning to do that, but that would be fantastic.
How, are you looking at January or anything, or
February, fine?
February?
Okay. We can always advance it if we need to.
Thank you.
February 10th?
Is February 10th okay?
I don't know if you guys noticed it.
1:30?
On this end.
Great.
Okay.
It's falling.
5 minutes
Yes,
or
please.
so? Okay. We'll be in recess.